to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Parenting. What would be some... Parenting's a big topic. I have 5 kids between 10 and 2 years old. There's a lot of parents that are listening to this podcast. And I feel like no one really feels like they're an expert at parenting.
Yeah.
And so anytime you get some parenting
It's the hardest job in
ideas,
the world, right?
yeah, it really is. They're open to it. So I know you've spent some time recently teaching on parenting.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your thoughts there? What are some of your current thoughts on parenting?
Well, again, I start with there's so little I know. So I got to start with, I got to walk up to this thing with great humility because my failures stick out pretty quickly, and it's you don't ever stop. You kind of transition from parenting to consulting when you have an adult child, but there's an element of being a parent that never quite goes away.
What age would you say go from parenting to consulting?
It's interesting. So I have a whole piece. I actually have a book I started and I never finished it, but it's called Right Then Left, and the subtitle is something about rite of passage. I don't think in the West we do a really good job of helping our children know when they're transitioning from childhood to adulthood. Like the Jewish culture does this really well.
Mm-hmm.
Native American culture does this really well. We just tend to, maybe by default it's when you go off to college, but like we're just not real good at that kind of thing. Like here's the mark. So for each of so I have twin 24-year-old boys.
Oh, I didn't know you had twins.
Yeah, off the top, that was interesting.
Wow.
21-year-old girl and a 14-year-old girl.
Okay.
So for the 3 oldest, who have all hit 16, gone through the age of 16, we've done a rite of passage.
Okay.
And it was a place, and I could summarize it by saying, hey, your mom and I, whatever you can do for yourself, we will no longer do for you. This is the mark of transition. So with the boys, I took them on an Appalachian Trail for like a 55-mile hike in 4 days. I thought this is going to be really good because it's going to be really hard on them, and it was the middle of July, and it was super hot. What I didn't factor in was that I was going to be with them.
You were thinking like the boys are going on this hike.
Yeah.
This would be great for the boys.
This is going to be so hard for them.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wait, they're 16, and I was in my mid-40s. I'm dying the whole time.
Yeah.
It's like, this was the dumbest idea. But there were these, we could tell that story. It's a powerful story. There are a lot of cool things that happened on that trip. But and there's a speaking into in this like sense of like, hey, you're becoming a man. This is a mark in time, and we marked it with down here in the South, getting your driver's license.
Okay.
You're now going to have a weaponized vehicle. Like if you don't take care of this, you can hurt someone. So we want you to see you have to be responsible as an adult. That started the kind of letting go. 18 was certainly another major transition point of this kind of you're becoming responsible for your way in the world. So those would be 2 marks. 16 and 18 for us were 2 primary. Mm-hmm. But there's from the day they come out of the womb, you start the process of letting go, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm just stewarding another human being on the planet. And my job is to be a guide. And I just did a parenting challenge last week, actually, with a good friend of mine named Anna Skates, and all of her studies been around what she calls respectful parenting. And it's creating a mutual respect and remember that that child is also a human being. Mm-hmm. And so we sometimes are like, you're dependent on me. I need you to, like, my home is full of chaos. I need you to function correctly so I don't lose my mind.
Yes.
And sometimes that's the practical, right? Like that's just the day. But when we can slow it down and be intentional and start to go, wait a second, this is about development. So when you're throwing a temper tantrum outside the car and you won't get in your seat and you're losing your mind, while we're at a restaurant or whatever, rather than like, get your butt in the car, I'm going to, whatever. It's like, this is interesting. And this is a word I use. This word's become so important to me. It's always been important, but I think it has catalyzed around this word. The word is curiosity. Is the more I stay curious, number one, the less judgmental I am for people and systems and political parties and all this stuff, the more curious I am. But when I'm curious, it also allows me to pull on that empathetic place to go,
yeah,
you're throwing a temper tantrum about what? And if you can slow it down instead of just getting the behavior fixed, you go, hey, buddy, well, clearly you're upset. Can you tell me Can you find any words around that? Like, what's that about? Developmentally, especially if they're young. Like, I don't want to leave. Oh, so this is about grief. You loved being in that place with that family or jumping on the trampoline or whatever. Like, this is actually you learning about separation and the grief of loss. So you're dealing with loss. Yeah. You don't have a lot of words, but you know how to cry and stomp your feet. But this is an opportunity to talk about loss. It's really hard when you love something to walk away from it, isn't it? Man, I hear that. And now suddenly you're on your knee, leaning against the back tire, talking to your kid. You slow the whole thing down. You get curious, and you have a wonderful conversation, and it can be empathetic. Like, I remember a time when I had a lot of loss, and it was really hard for me to let go or leave. But here's the good news. We're actually going to come back here. Or maybe we're not coming back to this place, but there's going to be another opportunity for fun like this. Would that be neat? Would that be it? Would you like to look forward to that? That's called hope. That's called anticipation. And you're giving them words and you're having a moment. And the next thing you know, often the thing is kind of somewhat been resolved and it's like, I see you, as opposed to, why are you freaking out? Get your butt in the car.
Yes. Well, now you're on the same side as the kid. Now you're on the same side with the kid on the issue, basically. Like it's you and the kid together, kind of looking at the issue together, and you guys are on the same side addressing it, as opposed to the parent and kid being on kind of opposite sides.
And watch how this shows up in almost every area of our life. You're doing a behavior that I don't really like. I have a degree of power. I'm going to power over you. You do what I tell you. Fix your behavior so I don't feel uncomfortable. Take that to every single relationship you have.
Yeah.
And if you slow it down, choose not to have a power over moral superiority, and you go, hey, tell me about that. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you love doing drugs? Tell me about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got ADD or ADHD, and actually when I smoke pot, I can't tell you how much it helps me show up in the world. So when you smoke pot, you actually feel more connected to yourself. Yeah. I don't even know if it's good for me, but my mind is going so fast, so hard all the time. I'm emotionally, mentally exhausted. Wow, okay. Well, in today's world, would CBD oil be an alternative? And maybe some of the other things that come with smoking, maybe you could avoid some of the negative aspects of that? Would that be a possibility? I don't know. I never tried CBD. Well, there's a shop up the street. You want to, I'll buy you some. Let's make an experience.
Yep.
Everything changes.
Yep. And now you understand them better. They may actually seriously consider some ideas that they hadn't considered before. They may not take them,
right?
But they may consider them. Yeah. And if you just come back to, no, you can't smoke weed, it's not legal here in the state or whatnot, then you're just reinforcing what everyone else is saying to them, and off you go. But the idea that curiosity breeds empathy is a new thought. And it's very interesting because it's right. When someone is curious about you sense a certain empathy that they have. I mean, what you just said about pot and CBD, it was curiosity and then it was empathy. That's an interesting concept that I had not thought of before.
And don't we all want to be seen?
Yeah.
In that moment.
Kids too.
Yeah,
kids want to be seen.
Every one of us.
They want to be seen at a young age. Just last week on the way home from jiu-jitsu, our 10-year-old son wanted to listen to the song, and he kept repeating it. And great song. I can't think of the name now, but basically it was like the singer is saying, I mess up a lot, but don't give up on me. I'm still a good person. I'm misunderstood, but I'm going to be there for the world one day. And he wanted to listen to it a few times, and I'm thinking to myself, that's what he's thinking.
Yep.
It's exactly what he's thinking, because you know what I was thinking when I was 10 years old? I was thinking some of the same thing.
And you know what? The singer saw him.
Yeah. Yes.
You know me.
And here's the honest truth of that, as much as I hate to admit it, that he felt more understood, I'll bet you, from that singer than he did by me at certain points, maybe right then, or at certain points in his life, too often, I would say. So yeah, I love those thoughts. How about girls and boys? If 3 boys and 2 girls, are there some things that do these what you're talking about here? Do these concepts work equally well with boys and girls? Or is there some difference you've noticed raising boys versus girls?
I think the concept works the same. The biggest difference is that process is very important to girls. So this is a stereotype because it's not true for all. Some boys tend to be just more emotional, and some girls tend to be less emotional. But the more emotional the person, the more process tends to be important, especially if they are a verbal processor or an extrovert, because they're having several needs met at one time. Verbal processors need to hear the words come out of their mouth, so it's auditory. They need to say it, but they're not just saying it; they're hearing themselves saying it, and it's helping them. It's like putting it out in the world and then like taking a diamond and spinning and look at all the facets. Then you have your internal processors. They don't actually want to say it. They also tend to not feel emotionally safe saying it. They want to spin it around in their minds, not out loud, because they're thinking internally. Those tend to be more introverted people. And then once they've thought it through a few times, they're safe enough to articulate it. This is a sweeping stereotype, but if there were some general differences, and it's true in my home, that with the guys, let's say there was a conflict or something, to be like, hey, you didn't do this. We need to do this. Tell me about this. How about that? Okay. The girls, you didn't do this. You didn't. Tell me about that. Tell me about that. We might be here for a while.
Yeah.
So I just buckle up because this may be a long, because they got to kind of find their way through it. The story's important. We're gonna go on these rabbit trails to here and details to there, and that's part of the learning. And so it takes a degree of patience. If you're not wired that way, then you have to be very patient. And especially if your agenda for the conversation was concise, which is true for if you've had a busy day, if you're wired as a man who this is rational, logical, let's get to the point. You've got to change your expectations. Expectations, as a great line I've heard, are often premeditated resentments.
Expectations are often premeditated resentments. Dang.
Stay with that for just a second. Because what happened was it's like writing in pen. I'm going to have a conversation with you. This is going to take 10 minutes or it's going to be done. I'm going to move on. Well, this conversation's not taking 10 minutes. Now, I hit the 10-minute mark, I'm resentful, I'm agitated, I'm frustrated. I wanted this to be over. I wanted to go change my clothes. I wanted to go eat. I wanted to watch the game. I wanted to be done. I'm just tired. And this happens with your spouse all the time. Now, wait a second. This was a 30-minute conversation, an hour conversation. You've just screwed up my night. Underneath, I've got this energy that's actually full of resentment. And it's starting to bubble up in anger and frustration. Now there's no seeing anything. Now I'm just trying to get my agenda done. Expectancy is a little bit more fluid. That's a little bit more like writing in pencil. Like, well, I kind of hope this conversation takes about 15 minutes. But if it doesn't, I might be a little disappointed, but I'm not thrown off.
Yes.
So there's a difference between expectations and expectancy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of that's semantics, but it's helpful when you can language something.
Yes.
So I just would say in parenting, if you have a highly emotional child, boy or girl, just know process is probably important, and let them kind of wander through it a little bit. It's important to listen.
For someone who realizes or is thinking to themselves, man, I parent too much on the side of certainty and giving commands and not listening enough. I'm asking for a friend. What do you suggest, or some ways they can start? I mean, do you just start at the next altercation, basically, and just start there? Like tonight, if something pops up, instead of just giving a command and expecting obedience, just talk through it more? Or how do you kind of start to ingrain this much better, more holistic, much more growth-oriented, preparing them for life way of parenting that you're describing?
Yeah. That's a great question. There are two ways. I think, first of all, you can deal with it. I think it's always better to be intentional ahead of time. I have some thoughts on that. But if there was an altercation tonight, a great phrase for you, just as kind of a hook, is, hey, tell me about that. Just so there's no judgment. And your tone, not, what are you doing? Not that, but like, hey, what's that? Tell me about that. It sounds like I hear a frustrated tone. Tell me a little bit about that. Well, oh my gosh, today I can't believe it. And You ask so much of me. You think I can do this and this and this, and does that feel like a lot? Yeah, it feels like a lot. So would you say you feel overwhelmed? That's what I'm saying. Of course I feel overwhelmed. Okay, well, what would it be like to not feel overwhelmed? Oh, heaven, are you kidding me? I'd have to leave this home. Okay, well, maybe this is something we can negotiate on. My hope for you is not that you live life overwhelmed. And it is really hard being a teenager. And whenever it comes to being overwhelmed, we always have to take it down into parts. So it feels overwhelming usually because there's so much on our minds. So let's sit together and let's make a list. Let me see if I can help. Tell me what you're overwhelmed with. I got homework, I got dance, I got this, I got that. What else? What else? Well, okay, so it's about 6 things. Yeah, it seems like there's so many more than that.
Right.
Okay, but these 6 things, yeah, okay. Is there anything it looks like I could help with? I don't have time to do my chores. Okay, let's negotiate. Would it be, you want to move that to Saturday morning? This week, would it help if I did your chores for you? Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll do them for you this week. Okay. See, now everything shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, your kid, honestly, most kids are going to be like, that's so weird. Dad's doing my, she'll go talk to your mother, her mother, and be like, Dad's doing my chores. Is something wrong with him? No, I just think your dad loves you. And, usually he's pissed. Well, there's a lot going on in our home. And honestly, for him to do this is a pretty big sacrifice. Yeah, okay. Everything shifts in your home.
Yes. Yep. Well, the one thing that stood out to me too is you're asking questions, not making statements. And it's like, man, we know that with other things. I mean, working relationships, those types of things,
well
you
said.
get your own way a lot better if you can lead people not in a manipulative sort of sense, but it's a lot better to let people arrive at their own conclusions through you helping them.
Well said.
Using questions, and so of course use that
if you can
with
look
kids.
at your kids like you're actually you're a human being, like my
Right.
friend
Yes.
or my colleague. What if I treated you like would I treat my colleague how I'm treating you right now?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question to ask. It's a great way to get curious.
Yes. Do your kids, have you been successful at, so you said 24, 21.
24, 21,
Yep.
and 14.
Yep. Do they like being around you, even though now they're old enough that they wouldn't need to be? Have you been successful at that?
What's cool is I remember when I was young thinking, I actually said this to teens, I'm like, oh, well, she's 14. She's still giving me a hug before she goes to bed. That's good. I don't know when does that end, And you know what? They all still give us a hug. My 14-year-old still every night says, I love you, Dad. Good night. So I feel really blessed. Yes. As a matter of fact, my sons and I, this has been a dream for a while, and it was always about timing. But yesterday, my sons and I recorded our first podcast.
Oh, cool.
So it's called Father, Sons, and Holy Questions.
Oh, very cool.
And
coming out soon.
Yeah, coming out soon.
Fathers, Sons, and Holy Questions.
Father, Sons, and Holy Questions.
Father, singular.
Yeah.
Sons, and Holy Questions.
Yeah.
Love it.
Because me and the twins.
Right.
And it's a conversation on nuance. The first episode is called A Return to Nuance.
Okay.
So it's a conversation. If love is context specific, why have we generalized, stereotyped, and dehumanized everybody?
Yeah.
So if we can get back to everyone is subtlety and nuance. So I don't know if you've heard this. I'm quoting a cinematographer. I can't remember, Albert somebody. But he said, tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance. And when we speak like everybody's this, Democrats are this, Republicans are this, politicians are this, religious people are this. When we remove the nuance, we get the superior moral high ground.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you put nuance in, you have to go back to empathy. Because now I got to see, wait. What happened to you when you were 8? Wait, how were you affected? How did this show up in your life later on? Being a middle child and unseen, how does that affect your pain?
Mm-hmm.
Enneagram type, how do you show up in the world with this personality type? Suddenly the nuance forces us to slow everything down, see people, and if we'll get curious, we'll wind up with empathy.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I think if your 24-year-old son's recording a podcast with you, mostly answer my question, because that is something my wife and I think about a lot. Not that we want them to just come and want to be with us as to sort of check some, or to be codependent, I guess, on them. But the truth is, when they grow older and make their own decisions, we want them to come by, you know? Bring your spouses, bring your girlfriends and boyfriends, and let's hang out, you know? That's a big statement about when nuance goes away. Boy, say that again about tyranny and nuance.
Tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance.